Welcome to the Room at the Table podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Milo. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Room at the Table podcast. I'm really looking forward to my time today. I've been looking forward to it for a few weeks now because Jodi is one of the reasons I even got into podcasting, actually, Jodi. I don't know if you know that, but today we're going to be talking to Jodi Snowdon. And Jodi is a mom of two boys. She's a wife. She's an author and a podcaster and a teacher. And she recently, I guess not recently, I know recently you added part to your book, but this came out, was it 5 years ago now? Depth?
22. So
22,
no,
so
maybe
3
4
years.
years.
3 or 4 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, 3 years.
3 years. Yeah, almost 26. That's how fast it goes. And her book is called Depth, Growing Through Heartbreak to Strength. And so we'll be going through a lot of her heartbreaks and where God has met her in the process. So I'm super happy to have you. Thank you so much for being on. I listen to your podcast all the time.
I love that. Yeah, that is so great, Kimberly. I'm so proud of you for starting your podcast. We had talked about it for years and I think it's so great. So congratulations.
Yeah, it's all God's timing. So thank you, my friend. And I met Jodi through, I know it was through R12. We had you come and speak, but it was actually before that I had you come and speak for my church ministry, but I'm trying to remember who introduced us before that. Do you remember?
You know what? So Catherine Land was part of your R12.
And still is. Yep.
And still, she asked me, she was the speaker person. So she asked me to speak for that and then introduced you to me. And then you started listening to my podcast. Then you had this opportunity to speak to your women's group.
Yes.
And it was 2020. So it was at a park and it was like outside.
Right.
And it was so special. And so, that's when we met.
Okay. And you were just getting going with your speaking at that time, right? Yes. It was like very in the beginning and
very in the beginning. I spoken. Listen, I can't even talk. I had spoken one other time and it was in Rwanda on a missions trip that I hadn't really done like women's ministry, but it was when I had that speaking time in Rwanda, I felt like God saying like, this is the next, you're going to start your podcast, you can start speaking. It was kind of like, okay. And so it was a beautiful time, Kimberly, with the women in the park. And it was like, God had given me this idea for a message over the summer. And then it was like, you were like, well, what would you like to share? And I'm like, you know what? This idea, God dropped in my head. And so I wrote the message. It was just so cool. So
I remember how he works. Because of COVID and we were in my backyard with all the moms and the daughters, and then you went with the girls in the front yard. So we made it work, even though Satan was trying to get us to be freaked out during COVID, but
yes,
we made it work. So that's how we know each other. Let's get the audience to know you a little bit, just kind of lighthearted. So pick a number between 1 and 10. I have all different questions.
Oh, 7.
7. Okay. Your guilty pleasure. What do you...
You know what's so funny? I was talking to my husband about this because I was like, I don't know what my guilty pleasure is. He's like, you love Baja fish tacos. Let's just keep it real. That's like my favorite. So that's one of my treats. We're total sweet people. We're actually super bad influences on each other because we'll be like, okay, we're not going to have anything. And then he'll come home with like carrot cake or something. So that's another guilty pleasure.
That's cute.
Yeah. So I guess that's probably what I would say. Okay. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, fair enough.
Pictures too. Pictures. I love to take pictures and like put them all around my house. And he's like a minimalist. So it's super funny because he's like, you put more pictures up. I'm like, I just love them.
He's not loving it, but he's like, okay, I'm letting it go.
Yes.
So cute. Okay. And I love to ask this question to people because they can take it deep or shallow. And it's not mine. It's from John Eldridge. The question is, to know you right now in this moment of your life, could be today or this season. To know you right now is to know what?
Well, I feel like this last season has just been back into heartbreak. So I would say before that, I feel like, I was in a place where I'm still in a place where I'm ministering to people, but I feel like I'm back now in that season when I wrote the book or when God gave me the words, I was telling a friend, like, I haven't had this much heartbreak since I went through my divorce and lost my friend. In 2014 was divorce. In 2016, I lost my friend. And that 2018 is when I started writing the book. So I feel like, and we'll share more about it on here, but I lost my dad. And so it's been a transition season. Like my kids are launched. I'm now an empty nester. I mean, so much change. I think in every role, I was talking to my mentor in every role of my life. As a mom, that role's changed. As a daughter, that role's changed. I just feel like I'm like, okay, God, I'm not good with change.
I know. I don't know if any of us are great with it. It's just very out of control feeling and awkward and wonky, and it takes time. It takes time.
So I'm kind of back to a good place where I'm just pouring back into myself more.
Okay.
Like I took a big chunk of time off my ministry to just spend time with me and God again because I couldn't pour out anymore. I needed to just input,
Mhm.
So now I'm
Very
starting
wise.
back out again, and I have just it was just really special that I guess sabbatical you can call it, that
Yeah.
time
No, it's
away.
it's important to do that if you can do it. I know some people can't
Yes.
do it, right? But if you can do it, to take that time to receive, especially when you're going through loss and grief and transition. And I personally believe every transition is a little bit of grief because you're letting go of what was, and it's just something new
Yes.
you have to embrace. And it's not always easy to create something new or fall into something new. It takes an adjustment of time. So I definitely respect that. Okay. So tell me, before we launch into like your book and some of the trials and traumas you went through that God spurred you on to write it, how did you come to know Jesus in the first place?
That's a good question. So I grew up in a Christian home. So we were introduced to Jesus at a young age, went to church all my life. But I think the decision of when it went from my head to my heart was in college. I believe before that I was a Christian, but the first time I actually felt the love of God versus just, heard about it like Jesus loves me, where I felt it was at a time where I was just going through a hard season in college. I had really bad acne and I was on this medicine called Accutane and my whole face was peeling. And I just felt at my lowest. And I just
Mm,
remember one time reading this devotional about this woman who had gone through something completely different, but she got this verse, the Hebrews, I think it's 13:5 and 6, but it's the Lord will never leave you nor forsake you. And she just felt at that time, she was just in this low place, and that verse really helped her. And I just remember reading that and going, oh my gosh, God, even though I'm feeling like the lowest I'm feeling, you have never left me nor forsake me. Like you are still here with me. And it was the first time I think the love traveled from I knew God loved me to I felt it in this like
mm,
deep place of where I needed to be, I needed it at the time. And then again, though, I do believe before that I was a Christian. But I think that's the first time I had some depth to my faith. And
yes.
then God has just grown again. I truly believe the hardest times in our lives are the most growing time in our faith. So
Mhm.
all my hard seasons have been when I really have seen my faith grow deeper with the Lord, and to the
Okay.
point where it was like, oh my goodness, why wasn't I clinging to him like I was,
I know.
right?
Often wonder that too. Why can't we cling to him in the triumphs? Not just
Yes.
like it seems like we forget about him in the triumphs. We forget to say thank you. We forget to say he's right here with me in the joy, but we are desperate for him in the hard parts. And I always wonder, why do we have to learn through pain, Lord? Like, why can't we get the lessons more in our identity through joy? But
Yes.
it's
I don't
just
know. I
mm,
wish we could learn that because it would be a lot easier, right?
a lot. Oh, how old were you then? Remind me, you said were
I
you
was
in
in
your,
college.
okay, so you were young and,
So I was, you know what? Oh, well, I probably accepted Jesus. I remember going to Christian camps and making the decisions,
mhm,
and then you did it again the next,
yeah,
multiple times.
yeah,
But I feel like when the faith became my own was high school, college. But I remember that moment in college just being a pivotal switch in my
mm.
mind of seeing God in a different way.
I have to say, and all the people that I have interviewed, and I don't know, I think I've done 8 so far, maybe 8 or 9. Everyone has had a moment where their faith became theirs, where whether they
Mm.
were raised in a Christian home or not, but even if they started to learn about who Christ was, even later, they ended up going, I get it now. Like now he's personal to me. Now I want to know him in a deeper way. It might not look how my parents raised me to be, but we weren't really grasping the reality of the relationship he wants with us until a moment. So I find that super fascinating. I wasn't anticipating that when I started this podcast,
Mm.
that whether you were a baby born into it or you found him later in life, everybody's had that moment where it hits them like, oh, now this is a different thing. Isn't
That's
that
the
so
moment.
fascinating?
Yeah, it's the moment when you realize I don't want to do life without you anymore. Like before that, it was like, oh, I tried to read my Bible here, and I think it was more like I felt like I had to. It was more of a
Yeah.
to-do list, but then it was like, oh my gosh, I get to because you showed up in a way, and I felt that presence of you in a way that now I desire to spend time with you. Does that make it was like a shift?
100%. Yeah, it's actually the testimony when you're going through the test, and that makes
Yes.
the testimony. Okay, so then were you always in your 20s then? Like just going to, first of all, were you here in California or did you travel? Like were you at school somewhere else and looking for churches, or tell me about like actually studying? Because it's more than just, I wanted to get to know him. It's like, well, then you have to do the work and that takes time.
Yeah. So I went to a Christian college and it was here in California. And so I just remember getting up early in the morning and opening my Bible. And it was this really cute, I still have it. It's like a pink one. It says Women's Devotional Bible. And so I had little devotions in the Bible. So I would read that. And then right next to it was the scripture. So I'd read, and that's what I would do to grow deeper during that time.
Okay.
I was in college and then I soon got married out of college. Probably a year after I got college was my first marriage. And we were in like Irvine area. So I went to the church that we went to when I was growing up in middle school and high school. And then we transferred to Saddleback Church. And then I've been there. And then now I'm at Mariners Church with my new husband. So they're both phenomenal churches locally here. And so, they've been a big part of my trajectory. But so
did you do women's Bible studies or did you do, because I have found in my own walk, that's not really, and I didn't really know Christ until I really decided to study the Bible. And the Bible, to be honest, is actually hard to understand if you don't have people helping and you don't have the history of it and the cultural pieces of why it was written and what's description and what's prescription. So really, it's not till I was studying. Did you find that too, that you needed to be in actual studies and having help?
Yes, I did. Well, I think it's nice for just having community. I think, is obviously for the added bonus of getting help with the Christian, reading of the word and all that, but just the community is so important. So I was in small groups, we did like the MOPS one and then they turned it to Treasured at Saddleback and it was like a Bible study. It was more than just a mom's group or like a MOPS group. And then I did, I've done Bible studies both co-ed with a spouse and also just single. And then for me, Christian books, like you can clearly see behind me.
Yeah. That's what her podcast is about. That's what her podcast, the name of your podcast, is it Depth with Jodi?
Yes, it's also Depth. Yeah. Growing Your Roots Deep. And for me, reading Christian books and the Bible was what helped it. So I would read this Christian author and I was like, they would recall a Bible story and they would unpack it. And it was like, oh, that makes sense. So then I'd go read it in the Bible and it would make it come more alive in a way than just even going to a Bible study. And so for me, I just dived deep into books right during my divorce. It was kind of my way to help cope with everything that was going on. I just read and read and read. And I think that's honestly where my depth was the most is again, which is why I hope my book will be part of someone's trajectory, because there's just something about hearing it through the lens of their story and as they're telling it of the Bible story that just really helped me,
Your book, and I can really relate to reading books. I've always been obsessed with books. And I just heard, did you hear Erica Kirk last night say that Charlie Kirk believed there was not a book budget?
No, I didn't hear that, but I love that.
Yeah, he told her there's no such thing as a book budget. And I was like, I so get that. Like, I'm constantly buying books. I have to hold myself back because I'm like, okay, you got to stop because I can't read them all fast enough. But I feel the same way as you. Like the books really, I think it's just the stories. Like I also love a really good like Netflix show. Like that's my guilty pleasure because I love stories and Jesus wrote in stories. Like he wrote in parables. Like this is how we understand humanity, I believe, is through another person's story. So your podcast is great for that. And I've often listened to your podcast and then I go buy the book of that author.
Yes, I love that.
And we haven't, it's so funny. I almost said we have a mutual friend. We don't have a mutual friend. But is it Kathy Wunenberg? Is that her name?
Yes.
That wrote Lifters? So I had read that book, Jodi, before I read in your book about it. And it's one of my favorite books to give hope and spread hope. So when I found out you were friends, I was like, of course they are. Like that was a really cool connection for me in reading your book.
That's my mentor, Kimberly. That is my mentor.
Oh.
And the story behind it is so amazing because her first book I ever read was Grieving the Child I Never Knew. Yes, it's a book on miscarriage, actually. And she's lost a lot. She's had multiple miscarriages and infant loss. And so I read that in 2006. And so when I was trying to get people on the podcast, she was one of the authors I wanted to have on the podcast. And around October 15th, which actually today is October 15th that we're recording this, it's infant loss and pregnancy and infant loss remembrance day. So on the podcast, the first couple of years I would do episodes. And so I tried to get her on. 2019 is when we launched. I couldn't reach her, but in 2020 we connected and we just connected deeply on the episode. And then at the end, she told this story of how she got her mentor is Carol Kent. Have you read anything by Carol Kent?
I don't know. Maybe I have to see the title.
She's really great. Anyway, so she I guess, just was praying for a mentor. God brought her into her life. So at the end, she was telling how don't ever underestimate God's connections that he makes with Christians. And so then after we wrapped that episode, when we weren't recording anymore, I was like, Kathy, I really would love, like, I've been praying for a mentor, and I really feel like we've connected. I would love to see, if you'd be interested. And we just bonded. It was just so, and her Hope Lifter book I read in 2015, and it's another one of my favorites.
It's literally like I keep it like out because I'm like, I need to go back in there because her ideas were incredible. I don't know. She's just anointed too. But so let's get into your book. Like your book is so good. Everybody, you need to go out and buy it. I'll link this in the show notes. But what I loved about your book, I read it really quickly. I read it in a few days because it was just like, you can really absorb it in chunks. You wrote it in, well, first of all, there's an acrostic called Strength, and then each few chapters is connected to the first letter of that acrostic. But it's very absorbable, if that's a word. Like you can digest it easily, and yet it makes sense. It's not like overly complicated or overly scriptural where you're like kind of confused. Like you just marry the two so beautifully. And I just thought, gosh, this is such a great resource for people. So
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, the chapters are really short on purpose because when someone's walking through grief, they don't have time to take in a whole, like sometimes you'll get a Christian book and there's 10 chapters and, the chapters are pretty long. So I have, 3 mini chapters under each of the headings of strength, this acrostic. Yes. And each chapter is like a little more than a blog post would be on purpose. So people can read it, get the truth, have something that day to feed them, but they know they can't get more than that in a day if they're in the middle of grief.
It. I really, really did. And I want to talk about some of my favorite parts to it. But
perfect.
Before you dive into like really the process of writing your book, did you write the book after you felt like the Lord had met you in all of those moments, or were you writing it during? Because that's what I couldn't tell. Like, did you write as you're going through?
No, I went through everything. I did start a blog in like 2014 where I just did like some raw posts, really horrible, honestly. But it was just like, I think God wanted me to document things. So later I'd have for when I wrote it in 2018. So no, I just feel like I never thought I'd be an author. I mean, I'm a school teacher. I teach science. I never set out to be a podcaster author, but after walking through this heartbreak and God was having me read so much that I started a blog called Sharing Heartbreak to Strength, sharing what God's teaching me in the midst of my pain. So it's just me kind of taking what I'm learning and sending it out to others. And then after 2 years of that, of like doing book recommendations, I remember I was like at the pool swimming and I just had this vision of like a book that was my story. And at the end, I felt like I said to God, do you want me to write a book? And he was like, yeah, I do, of your story. So it was kind of like, what? So that was in 2017. I didn't actually write anything till 2018. And then there was multiple, like editing of it and stuff, but the majority of it came out in 2018. What's interesting is I went to pitch it at Heartbreak to Strength. At Proverbs 31 Ministries. And at the time, the title was Heartbreak to Strength. And I hadn't finished the book because I ran out of time. So I just went and pitched it with the book proposal. And I hadn't lived out the last chapter yet. My final chapter in the book before the epilogue, which I just added, chapter 26 was in 2019. It was my Rwanda trip where I spoke for the first time. And so it's just beautiful how like, I'm so glad I didn't like try to jump ahead and self-publish. And I just waited for God because there was still more story to come out of me that needed to go into this. And then, so yes, I did not write it as I was experiencing it. No.
Okay. And it's hard to wait for God in the timing, for sure.
Yes.
Great, because he knew what's best. Okay, so walk us through, and I really related to some of what you were talking about and just the grief in general over the different types of loss. So walk us through the different traumas that you went through that spurred the book on.
Yeah. So the book was about my 3 greatest heartbreaks when I wrote it. So my first heartbreak was in 2006 when I lost a baby, and it was in between my 2 sons. I had a miscarriage. And I think the greatest heartbreak, though, if I had to say, was my divorce. It's probably what started this whole ministry to begin. It started that year is when I started kind of writing and was reading all the books. And then in 2014
was the divorce.
Okay. Yeah. And 2016, just on the heels of that, I was literally still recovering from the divorce. I hadn't even feel like I had made the leaps and bounds I wanted to. My friend who I met at a MOPS group, which I was just sharing with you about the community at a MOPS group, sadly, she got pancreatic cancer and passed away. And my son and her daughter were super close. So that's my 3rd greatest heartbreak. So those are the 3 heartbreaks that are included in the book. Okay. And it's really hard to write a book with 3 different storylines. So I was like, God, I don't really know how to do this. Like, what am I going to do? So I prayed fervently for that. And that's when that strength acrostic, I feel like he dropped it into my head of
Wow.
like, you're going to do a chapter about, under the each heading, you're going to do something about each 3 heartbreaks, because you have things that will work. So that's how I feel like he helped me
Structure it.
structure it. So it's not, because you don't want to do it chronological. So then it's all about the it's like it would be.
And that was the other thing I noticed in the book is that you would keep kind of going back into how that loss related to that acrostic. So I felt like I kept going back into the journey for another angle of it, which was really interesting as the book kept going, because it's kind of kept it fresh, which sounds maybe not the right word, but it kept it going. Oh, and then that's this part of it. And then this part of it. Because just when I would think she's done with it, it would come back. So it was kind of neat to see the different view. Like you were looking at each pain holistically with all those different acrostics. So it was a neat way to write a book. So anyway, okay. So it started with your 2006. Sadly, you lost your daughter.
Yes, baby Grace. We named her baby Grace. So again, you walk through life, you just think everything's going to go as you hoped and planned. So we, had our first son, Kyle, and 3 years later we get pregnant, and go into my 12. I actually had gone through, it was 16-week loss. So I'd gone in at my 12-week appointment. The heartbeat was strong. The doctor said, it's looking great. So we took a picture of Kyle in a little, I'm going to be a big brother shirt, and announced it to everyone, we're having another baby. And then around 13 to 14 weeks, I just felt different. And everyone's like, oh, you're starting your second trimester. I'm like, no, I know how that feels. I've had Kyle, but like something's wrong. But there was no symptoms, I wasn't having cramping or bleeding or anything. So I couldn't wait to get to my 16-week appointment and have them confirm everything was okay. So I kind of already, so that's the opening of the book, is that drive to that appointment where I'm already questioning something's wrong. And then when we get in there, she puts the Doppler on my stomach to try to find, and there's no heartbeat. So you could hear my heartbeat and it's just increasing. So then we went into an ultrasound, and I knew what to look for because I'd already had a baby. And as soon as they pulled up the picture, baby looked completely fully formed, but no heartbeat. So it was devastating.
So
I feel like that was the first time life did not go as I hoped or planned. And like the rug got pulled out from under me. And I just sat there like, what do we do? Like, how do I move forward on this? And so it was very challenging. I think that was the time that God taught me a really beautiful lesson. My life verse kind of came from that time with the baby, because like a year, maybe even 2 years right after that, I got a phone call from a friend who someone walked through the exact same circumstances. She had a son versus a daughter, but it was still 16-week loss. And she's like, this lady at my church had this happen. No one knows what to say to her. Would you like talk with her? And I'm like, I don't really know what to say, but I'm happy to, at that time we emailed back and forth. There wasn't really text. It was like 2008, because my loss was 2006. So it was either 2007, 2008. And I just kind of shared things with her that like we did, like I made a baby book with just the ultrasound pictures, and someone gave us a tree to plant in honor of the baby. So I told her how special that was. And so I just kind of shared these things with this woman, and it just really made an impact on her. And so that verse, 2 Corinthians 1:3-4 says, praise be to the God who's comforted you, so then you can go and comfort other people. And that was the first time I was like, oh, maybe our hard things aren't just because they're like meant to go help someone else after. It was like
the point of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the first time that happened. But there wasn't as much depth because I was still young, and my divorces were so much of my growth and deep roots, and so much I learned about brokenness. All that happened.
But how long would you say that process, that journey of grieving, like you didn't try to have another baby right away? Like I know that different women have different responses to their miscarriages. And I think, of course, it depends on what stage the baby is in. And so how was it for you? Like, was it, really, did it take you down for the count? Or, I mean, that's pretty far in. That's after the first trimester. So you feel safe in hoping and being excited, right? So how long was the journey till you kind of had to you could move through the grief and like start to function? What was that like for you?
Well, it took a long time, I would say. So at Saddleback, they have a grief support group called Empty Arms.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really helpful to sit in a room with other people that had also lost a baby, whether it was through miscarriage or infant loss. It was, someone that has the same not symptoms, but the same grief. It wasn't like
Yeah.
we're in a group where someone lost a sister, but a baby. It was just, it was for people with empty arms. And so
Yes.
that was very helpful. I feel like that summer we just kind of hunkered down and didn't do a whole lot, just kind of stayed low as a family. I thankfully had my Kyle, so that was good. I still had to be a mom, so he would help me get out the door, right? Because if not, I probably would have just laid in bed. But he's a 3-year-old bouncing off the walls. Let's go to the park. And I remember one time going to the Thomas the Train table at the Barnes and Noble. I don't think they even have those anymore, but
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right over at Spectrum. And this lady, the sweetest lady, she didn't even meet you. She goes, "How many kids do you have?" And I literally started sobbing to this poor woman in public. And then I realized maybe I'm not ready to go out in public yet, but I just didn't know what to say. So I just said to her, "Oh, I just lost a baby." And she felt bad, but her question wasn't abnormal. No. I mean, I ask people all the time, "Oh, how many kids do you have?" But at that moment in time, it just cut to a deep wound. Yeah. So then the support group helped me come up with an answer. I have one here on earth and one in heaven. And so it was nice to have the support. So we ended up, Connor was born the following June. So the following May, we lost baby Grace in June and then the following May. Okay. So I wasn't expecting to get pregnant that quick, but I think it was actually a gift from God because there's a chapter in my book where I talk about the symptoms that baby Grace had. She ended up having what's called Turner syndrome. There was like a chance it could happen again. Right. And I found that out on the day I was pregnant with Connor. Like I found out I was pregnant. So it's like God knew, like if I had known there was a risk, I might not have tried for a second one because I would have been scared. And so I just think his timing is beautiful and everything. But yeah, we did a special remembrance for baby Grace for years where we let go balloons and sent them up to heaven. And I mean, I don't do that anymore, but we probably did it faithfully for 8 to 10 years after her loss.
Okay. So you have a second child. Well, no, a third child. You have a third child with your son. And what year was he born?
I'm sorry, I keep wanting to say 2007. So it was just a year after we lost baby Grace at Connor.
Okay. So then you're now raising the 2 kids and you're married. And then you said 2014 was when you found yourself going through a divorce. So that was your kind of first, you said, even deeper trauma where it really rocked your world to the point where this book started to really get legs.
Yeah, I would say like the brokenness I felt from the divorce was different than the grief I felt from the miscarriage because there's shame attached to divorce. I talk about shame in the book. It just broke me. Like I actually talk about a broken clay pot and I actually brought it. I didn't know if,
I know. I want to see it. Yeah.
So this is the one that I use when I speak. So what I did is I took a pot that looked like this and I just went into the backyard.
So for those listening, we only on Apple, we only have audio. She's got little terracotta small clay pot. She's got 2, one that has been broken in pieces and is pasted, glued together. And one that's not, one that's new and whole and never been broken.
Yeah. And I just took the new one to the backyard and, I have a little raised flower bed and I just hit it against until a little splinter came and then the whole thing just kind of buckles. And then I went and I glued it back together with hot glue and put a little candle in it and the light kind of streamed out through the cracks. And it just gave me this thought of, I used to think brokenness was negative. Like, I don't want anyone to know my issues. I don't want anyone to know my struggles. Like that's not a good thing. Like this is what I'm doing well. But then I came to this point of like, I was so broken, like there was no way of hiding anymore. It's like, this is me, broken pieces. But then I saw the light coming out and I realized, wait, I think we're supposed to show this version of ourselves, the vulnerable, authentic. This is where I struggle because no one wants, let's keep it real. If someone's like, I have it all together, like who wants to be around that person for very long? Nobody. So when you say like, this is a hard thing I'm going through and look how God showed up in the middle of it, or like, that's a person you want to spend more time with. And so God just showed me that the brokenness didn't disqualify me, which I used to think it did. The brokenness was the very ingredient used to help another hurting heart. When I would come to people and say, I've been divorced.
That's right.
And I'm walking through it right now and I'm just broken and God's just putting me back together and talk about refiner's fire and, pruning me and all. Like people relate to that.
And that just reminds me of when Jesus says, I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick, and it's not that he's not for all of us because he is. What he was saying is you minister, you teach, you love on the people who need help the most. So when you're broken, that's where his light can really do the most healing. So I
Yeah.
love the image of the bowl. And I think there's even a Japanese bowl where it's got the gold fill. Oh, there it is. Yeah,
Yeah,
there it is. What is it called again?
it's called kintsugi.
Kintsugi.
And what I loved, okay, so literally God is using broken clay pots to like blow my mind away on like and trees. Those are my two things. Because after I did this, then every time I'd read a book and there was something about broken clay pottery, like it would just add even more to how I was like feeling and dealing with. So this is something that I came across probably a couple years after. And what they do in this Japanese art is they actually put gold in the cracks to put emphasis on them. So instead of hiding, like everyone wants to hide their cracks, like, oh, I got, no, that's not a struggle. But instead of hiding them, you actually like bring people to look at them. Like you emphasize them
You highlight
with gold.
Yeah.
You highlight them with gold, kind of saying this is actually a beautiful thing. Look at the beauty because of our cracks. It's like,
I love
it's
that.
just, yeah. So that has, and so again, I bought like one on, I don't know what place, again, and people I know like break pottery and try to put it together with gold lacquer and do it themselves. And I just think it's beautiful. And so that was really my divorce, this brokenness. I felt like God really said, you know what? This is where you're going to now meet people and like help them in their heartbreak, because you have been now, I've shown you all the, like this. So this is when the blog, the podcast, all this was birthed out of the divorce. I mean, really, that's the biggest one. Originally, the book was just going to be on that, but I felt like God saying, add your other heartbreaks to it. And I do think it made a better book because it's.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the divorce is really what leveled you. Like it really shifted, like, because that's such a life change, right? Like, and there's, like you said, there's the shame with it. And I think whenever there's really deep shame like that, it really confronts your identity. Like, who am I? Am I who he says I am? If I go through this thing that I don't want to have gone through, kind of a thing. So the divorce, in terms of dealing with the divorce, did you feel like you were able to see God in it right away, or did that take time? Because I'm sure the grief is
time.
You can't even see God, sometimes.
Well, you know what? It's interesting. I think Pastor Rick had just, so Saddleback Church, Pastor Rick Warren was there, for years. And in April of 2013, his son sadly took his life. And so he took like a sabbatical, and then he came back that fall. So that would have been fall of 2013. So my divorce happened January of 2014, just 4 months later. And he did a series about how God will use your pain. And it was like his most powerful, best speaking. Like I took notes like no other. And I just was like, whoa. So on the heels of finding out, the divorce was going to be happening, I went and found those message notes and I started reading them again and saying, God doesn't waste the pain and God could use it. And I remember writing like, God, I know I got a long way to go to heal from this, but like, I don't want this wasted. Like, as I see it, he used it. Like, I want you to somehow use it. So I think I had some like beautiful perspective and hope that I probably wouldn't have had if I hadn't walked through that series with him and seen how he was using it. But to be honest, I was in counseling for years and just, there's so much that you have to work through. And still trying to be a good parent to my kids, and then you're co-parenting. And so it was challenging. In the book, I'm very honest with my struggles and my issues. I even have a chapter called Embrace the Chisel, where I really get honest with my part, which I will always share. I don't share anything about anyone else's part because it's not mine to share, but I'm real honest with and I did have a struggle with anger and, had a part in the divorce, had a part in the marriage, having to struggle. So I just needed God to break me so he could put me back into a person that would be vulnerable to share. Because up until then, I wanted to be the perfect pot. I wanted to be the pot with no cracks. I did not want, but now I realize, I don't want to ever be that pot.
Well, sounds like there was a humbling there, right? Yes. Like a humbling and kind of a dying to self, because we want us to come across a certain way, or I have my needs, or I know what's right. But then carrying your cross means sometimes dying to self, right? And saying,
yes,
I don't know what's best here. Like I need to trust him and what he's doing in me rather than what I think is best for me. And that's that can be a scary place to be sometimes. But I loved in the book how you talked about your parenting with your kids. Like I could really feel your desire to parent them well as a single mom. Like I really was a neat perspective for me who hasn't gone through that as a single mom. But I felt like, gosh, I've always had such respect for single moms, always like, it's got to be so much harder. And then you're also trying to provide. And hopefully if you have the other parent is able to provide, but sometimes not. anyway, you did a really beautiful job of sticking to your side and your perspective, your journey, and trying to raise them. I love some of the ideas that you had with things that you did with your boys. Like, it was just really sweet to hear how you tried to embrace being a good mom without being in a marriage when that's what you wanted. So
Thank you.
I felt touched by your story in that too.
Thank you. Yeah. The time with my kids became priceless because, when you're with your kids all the time, it's like sometimes you take it for granted, but now I have limited time because some of the time now they're with their dad and I'm not there anymore. And so that it was like a jewel now to be guarded. So I was very intentional. I think that word intentional was my word for 2015. I would pick a word and then intentional with my time when they weren't home. Like now that's my time to read and pour into myself and God grow me, So it was a beautiful journey that God had me on. And I love the version of me now versus my pre-divorce, person.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't go back and change anything.
So much growth and strength. Okay. So you're going through this in 2014, and that's obviously a few years of process and counseling. And what does this look like now? My life is very different. But then you have one of your closest friends comes down pretty suddenly, right? With pancreatic cancer.
Yeah. So her son, we both have 2 kids, and her oldest, they're the same ages. So she has a daughter and I had a son, and then we both had sons. And so we were leading the younger son's KSG, kids small group at church.
Yeah,
and she was sharing how she just kept having these pains, and she was going to doctors and trying to figure out what was wrong. And that was in March. And in April, I think, was when she finally got the diagnosis, and she passed in August. So it was quick.
So fast and furious. How awful. And her kids how old were the children?
So at the time they were 13 and 9. Yeah. So young, very young. And so now I became kind of like a mentor to them, and it's actually really beautiful. They're still in my life. I call them my bonus kids. And they actually came and lived with me for a little while, but they're just, I realized they needed, a support of of a mom, right? They had their dad, but they needed, but God, again, it was like, God, I just can't go through another like heartbreak like this. This is like so much at once. But I think what I had learned through my divorce really helped me with my heartbreak with my friend. But I just struggled with the why more on that one. Like, why God? Like her kids needed her. So I have a chapter in the book called Why God that I just try to, talk about that, because I think a lot of people go, wait, I can't trust a God that would do this. Like, why? And so I try to talk about that. And I remember just feeling lost. I didn't know, but I knew I needed to trust. Like, even though I didn't understand, I still had to trust that God had a plan bigger than I can understand. And I remember I guess he wasn't a doctor, but just Craig Groeschel wrote a book called Hope in the Dark. And he talks about 2 families that walk through the exact same circumstances. One gets the miracle of healing and the other didn't. And then he says this, which is what was so profound to me, because you would think God only showed up for the one that got the healing. But he goes, he showed up to both, but as one, he was the healer. For the other, he was the comforter. And see, sometimes we want the healer, like we want it the way we want it. But sometimes God's like, no, I'm going to meet you in your pain in a different way. I want to show I'm faithful. I want to show I'm the comforter. And it was a really beautiful way for me to see, like, okay, why didn't you heal her? I still don't fully understand why, but it gave me some good perspective.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure having those children be your kids' ages was a whole different layer of grief, because you're grieving for them to not have their mom. Not only are you grieving the loss of my friend, but she was young. I mean, she was
very young,
and it doesn't make sense. And why would he allow this? And all the questions that, to be honest, when you're a Christian, it's a lot harder, because you know Christ, you know his love, and you know his comfort, and you know his sovereignty. And then when things don't make sense, it's really hard to stay in your faith unless you've been in it for a long time and you really understand all of the dynamics of being a believer and holding to your faith. So I commend you for, walking so closely with her through her dying, because you did a great job in the book explaining how she was really suffering. It was hard to read, because I know people right now who are walking through physical suffering from illness, and it's just, you want to take the pain away so badly. And you can only do so much, and prayer is a big part of that. But you did a great job explaining that in the book.
Thank you. Yeah. You know what? I would take her to her chemo appointments and sit there with her. And I also watch the kids a lot. My kids and her kids are like family. They actually call each other like brother and sister kind of. So they were over at my house all the time so she could rest. But probably my favorite chapter in the book that has to do with Jeannie's storyline is the gift of a day. It's in the give praise to God even as your heart breaks section.
Okay.
And honestly, it was like, it's August 2nd was the day. And I was planning to take Lucas to my house with Connor and take him like to one of those jumping places, get this energy out and let Jeannie have a day of rest. The older two were at junior high summer camp with church. And she called me and she said, can you come here and let the kids play upstairs? I'm just too weak to get in and out of bed by myself now. And so I call it the gift of a day because in my mind, I wasn't planning to spend the day with her. I was planning to take her son and let her have a day of rest, but we got a whole day together. And, when you know someone's on the end of their life, I got to share everything I ever wanted to say to her. We cried huge tears whenever we brought up her kids. But then she asked me to do something with her that was really difficult, but really sacred. She asked me to help plan her service. And so we picked songs for her service, which I would help plan with her husband after. And it was one of those things where I was like, I wasn't expecting this day to happen, but it was such a treasured time with her that it was like a gift. And like sometimes when we're in the middle of hard things and we think, well, I can't praise God, like this is hard, but can we praise him for something small, like extra time with that person or an encouraging word from a friend or someone brought you a meal? I mean, we're not praising him for the heartbreak we're in. We're praising him for the little ways. So that gift of a day, like it would end up becoming one of my most priceless days with her because she was still able to talk really well. And we laughed. We had so much laughter, but so much tears. It was just a full day of like
so beautiful
extra time. Yeah. And
so beautiful. And what was that like to help plan her service while she was still alive? I mean, that, everybody swallows in their throat when they hear that part of the podcast, I'm sure, because I just did. So what was that like to
We picked out the songs. I think she was worried her husband would be overwhelmed. So she wanted to have things lined up. So we're talking about what pastor and one of the people in our kids' small group, one of the girls, her dad was a pastor. So we reached out to him and he obviously said, yes, he would do the service. And then we just picked songs. So we put on worship music is what we did that day. And we would just sing together and kind of like sit there in the song. Like, what do you think about that one? And we just picked the songs. I mean, it's sweet. Really humbling, it's one of those days where like, I don't know. It's really sacred though. Like it was a sacred time with her I'm
so glad you got that. I'm so glad you got that really raw, just genuine moment she probably felt so safe, Jodi, knowing that you were going to be helping, her family and her children. And I mean, sounds like you were a gift to her as much as the time was a gift for you.
Yeah, it was.
You do a really beautiful job in the book explaining what it's like to hold hands with somebody who's going home. That's kind of what I like to call home. So just so well done. So well done. And I thought it would be good for me to point out a couple of the parts of the book that really, I mean, I have almost every page dog-eared, but
that's so fun.
Tabs in here. The acrostic, I thought I would read it to everybody so they can hear what strength stands for. So the S in strength is seek God and invite him into your pain. And then you have 3 little chapters on that, right? And each one of these 3 little chapters. Okay. And then the T in strength is tearfully allow yourself time to grieve and process the emotions. Do you have these memorized, by the way?
Yeah, pretty much. Real quick, I wanted to say 2 things about this acrostic. If someone's in the middle of grief, those first 2 are like for those that had just got the news, the divorce papers arrived or the doctors diagnosed, like the seek God and invite him into your pain and tearfully allow yourself time to grieve. Like that's at the beginning. And that could take a year, 2 years, like that. These aren't like one and done, check. Yeah. But this is how God walked me through from heartbreak to strength. And it's his strength, not my own strength. But I always tell people if they're just in the middle, like the news, it's just brand fresh new. This is where they're going to want to park themselves for a while. But someone that's maybe had their grief for a while and is having a hard time getting past it or finding God's purpose in it, or then these next ones are for you. So I just don't want someone who's like freshly just found out their loved one passed, when they hear the R, to be like, what? I'm supposed to do that right away. Like this was years later, right? So I just want to preface that.
Well, and also I know in the grief process, there's a lot of stages and you can bounce around between them. And everyone's journey based on their temperament and their situation, their circumstance is going to be different. So, but at least there will be certain touch points. And that's kind of what how I saw the acrostic strength is that you could go
Yes.
back in and bounce around.
You
Okay.
hop around. Yes.
Yeah, you hop around, whether you want to or not, like your emotions, you don't really get control over it. Okay. The R for strength is replace your finite view with God's infinite perspective. The E is embrace God's character development in the midst of the chaos, which is the chiseling. Is that right? Which is hard
Yes.
to do. It's like the radical acceptance of how he's changing maybe you and the way you look at things and how you're growing. The N is never lose sight of God's grace. The G is give praise to God even as your heart breaks, which is very hard to do, especially if you're a newer Christian or not a Christian, but especially even if you're mature and your heart is just broken, it's really hard to give praise. And yet we're called to do that because he's always good, even though our situations are not.
So true.
The second T is trust God is good when your mind is doubting and you don't understand. And the last letter H is honestly share your story and help another hurting heart, which is what you do in the book. And you're just open and honest. And I know this book has probably helped many people. Have you had good feedback over the years of what people have received from it?
I have. Yeah, I have. I think that a lot of times we don't want to share our story. We kind of just want to say, okay, God, this is just between you and me. And I just want to encourage someone that the healing comes full circle when you then help someone that's behind you. And I like to talk about like a bridge. And sometimes we're the ones on the bridge that needs someone to come across and say, hey, I've been through this. Let me help you across.
Yeah.
And they offer just words of encouragement, hope. And then we're now across and now we need to look back and there's going to be someone coming. Now it's our turn to go and help them across. And the story I told about the miscarriage, the young lady was named Clarissa. And I wanted to use her real name in the book, but I needed to get permission. Well, I had lost touch with her back in 2008, back when it happened. And so I, by God's grace, found her and asked her if I could put her story in the book. And she said yes. And then she said this, Jodi, I gave her that Kathy Wannenberg book, the Grieving the Child I Never Knew. And she's like, I buy that book for people now and I give it to them. And so she's now doing the same thing. She's helping people across the bridge. And now since my book has published, she's now giving my book. And it's just a beautiful way to think like, where are you on the bridge? Are you in the middle of the bridge?
That's right.
Are you in the middle of it? And you need someone to help you. You're stuck. You're grieving. And then, but are you past that and you're on the other side of the grief and you're maybe not ever overcome it. Grief changes us, but you're in a better place. And is there someone else that needs to hear your story, but you're like, oh, it's going to dredge it all back up and I don't really want to do it. But oh, friend, you're going to have so much more healing and you're going to be like a part of their trajectory of how God's going to use them. And that's my favorite part of the book is the H section, because I think that is where I seen God use people's pain. You know, when people go through pain, they go, why? I don't understand. But if there's a purpose to it, it makes it like, okay, I still wish I hadn't gone through this, but now I see the purpose. This is the purpose part. The purpose is this helping others. The purpose is the character development, that other section. And Joseph is my favorite character in the Bible. And, you know, God put a big calling on his life when he was a teenager, but he was not ready for that calling. If he had been dropped into that at the age of, you know, they said he was an older teenager. So let's just say like 15, 16.
When he went in the well and brothers put him in the...
Yeah, but if they had put him directly into his calling, right, to be second to Pharaoh, like he would have floundered. He was not... God had to develop his character. How did he do it? Detours. He had to go through one hard thing after another. And along the way, God chiseled him to make him this man that when he finally got to his destiny, where God had him be second to command of Pharaoh, he could forgive the brothers that initially started the whole chain reaction of things. Well, that's someone that's grown. You know, your roots are going to grow deeper during this hard time that you're walking through. And I know that maybe it's not good enough for you. Like, I still don't want to go through it. Well, none of us want to go through these things, but it does say in the Bible, you will face trials. It doesn't say if, it says when you face trials. So we all have a thing we're going to face, whether it's the death of someone or the loss of a friendship or infertility or, you know, I mean, there's so many heartbreaks, right? I mean, I listed my 3 in the book, but you don't have to have one of my 3 to read the book. Like the book is not because, like, obviously if you have one, you'll relate to that section more, but it's written for anyone walking through grief or heartbreak or loss. It could be any reason, but God will use that to develop you. Yeah. We just have to, you know, take those broken pieces. We can hold them and say, nope, I'm not sharing it. I'm not telling anyone. or we can say, hey, this is how God used me. And I think that's where I like to, when I speak, really encourage people to say, who's that person? Like, pray, God, who do I need to talk to? You don't have to tell it to the whole world. Maybe you're not ready. You don't want to be a speaker or whatever. Like, that's fine. But one person that's you know in your life that your story will benefit, that you can help encourage them.
When you're going through these different pains and these different transitions and grief and letting go of the old you, of the pain that you went through and letting God stretch you, did you feel like you were actively seeking what God was doing to you personally in the pain, in the loss? Or is it more like it was like just secondary, like it just, you realized when you kind of stepped back and you looked how you had changed? Or were you active? Because sometimes I think the pain is so big, you almost can't look for him and kind of be intentional about what is he doing when the pain is that deep, because you're just trying to survive it.
Correct.
So,
my first time, no. But now that I have walked through what I've walked through, I do look for it. So it's kind of a catch-22. So let me back up to the divorce. I thought I was reading books to heal me. And honestly, I would tell people I'm reading books for healing, but I had no idea at the same time I was healing, God was growing me. So I was healing, but my roots were growing deep at the exact same time. So these books, these times in God's word, it wasn't just for healing, which was a huge part of it, but it was also this depth growing, right? So I don't think I knew that till after, like later I look back and went, oh, and that's when that tree image where I saw the deep roots became so powerful to me, because I was like, that's what happened, But now, as I'm going through my fresh heartbreak of losing my dad, which happened in May, I now know that, thank you. I now know these things. So I'm seeing, like, I'm more aware that there's going to be this character development, and I'm aware of it now. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like,
because you've been through it now, and you know how to find God, how to look for him, how to be open to what he's doing in you and for you. So it maybe gets easier, but I don't think anyone can compare their grief or compare their pain. No. But I think it's important to see, what did he do there and what did he do there, and be intentional to look for it. And that's what I love about my fellow Christians, is that we're always looking to see what is God doing here? What was the point of that? What can he do? What's the purpose through it, rather than being angry and bitter and staying stuck in it? It's, yes, you need to feel all those feelings, and they might come up again, and they might come up again, but that they're not wasted. And I just love that. And the goal is to be helping other people as well, and just say, he's growing you, he's helping you in this, he's being tender in this, he's comforter in this, and what was the other word you called him? Healer in this, like
a healer. Yes.
Yeah, I loved how you also said there's a section in here where you talk about making sure people know all the different names of God.
Yes.
And I really loved that, because he has different names, El Shaddai, El Roy, like there's different things, and it's so important to know who he is. On page 33, which is one of my favorite numbers, page 33, you have a whole list of your thoughts. It's like, I feel alone, I'm worried, I'm weak, I'm afraid, I want to give up. And then you have a list of God's truth, which is just a nice, beautiful snapshot of scripture versus the thoughts we have. And then my favorite chapters were a divine appointment. So I want to read some of the things in here, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the divine appointment, you said Lisa had realized our enemy often knows who we are in Christ before we do, which I thought was really powerful, because, he's always looking around to see where he can get to us, and he's so sneaky, and what can I make her or him think or doubt or feel? She spoke boldly into the microphone, quote, Satan has made it his aim to distract us from becoming who we really are meant to be, and to stop us from living out the purpose God has given us. And I just thought that was so, so powerful. And you were receiving those words. I think you were Lisa Bevere, you were reading at a conference, and you were listening to her speak.
It was a Women of Faith conference. Yes.
Yes. The attacks on your life have much more to do with who you might be in the future than who you have been in the past, which I thought was so profound, that, Satan knew you could be really powerful. And so he's going to constantly try to interject and stop you from your growth in Christ.
And
but
he almost succeeded, except until that conference, when she spoke those words. I felt like it was like, oh my goodness, Satan has been in my ear. Shame, shame, shame. No one's going to want to hear from you. You can't be used by God anymore. You've gone through a divorce. I mean, I remember that day she spoke, and I just I felt a freedom like I never felt. And I remember saying, I may be a broken vessel, but God can still use me. I remember just shouting it. I may be a broken vessel, but God can still use me, because at that time I felt like my brokenness disqualified me. And
Yeah.
he was trying to shame me into believing, like, you don't, first of all, don't tell anyone. And second, if you do tell them, look what they're going to say. Like, what? You're a
Yeah.
Christian. You've been going through a divorce. And so that was a very powerful moment in my trajectory. That was like September of 2014. So January 2014 is when we split. And then it was and right after that, October is when I wrote my first blog post and started my blog. So
Wow.
he was working overtime to
Totally.
shut me down. Mm-hmm.
And I see that, Jodi, all the time. And the older I get, the more I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such like his playground where we just allow him to come have a seat at the table and play around. And we give him so much access to our doubt and our insecurity and our thoughts. And it's just, I'm not saying that there aren't some, chemical problems that people can have with their mental health. Absolutely 100%.
Right.
But there's also where we'll turn things over and allow him to kind of enter, and we don't block and say, that's not the truth. That's what I love about Christianity, is like, what's the truth say of who God made you to be? And it really breaks my heart to see people, whether they're grieving or going through traumas or an illness, and then they stay stuck maybe in that, and they don't know how to claim and hold on to the victory that even in that overwhelm, they can learn how not to give so much freedom to Satan to take over it. I mean, and I'm a victim of that all the time too. Like, I just tend to go that way. I'm like, oh yeah. Like, I remember the truth now.
Can I speak into that real quick? Because
Yes.
this chapter, so the end section, never lose sight of God's grace. I really struggled to figure out what the end should be. I feel like God was giving me the acrostic, and I was just there. I couldn't come up with a good thing. And a friend of mine who had gone through a divorce also was like, you need to talk about God's grace, because some heartbreaks have shame attached to them. Not every one. So like my miscarriage, I didn't have shame. I didn't do anything. The baby miscarriage, but the divorce was like, oh, this is shameful. And there's addictions and people have heartbreaks that there's shame attached. And so I think that Satan's working overtime for people to think, oh, if only anyone else knew. And that's why that H, and honestly share your story, is such a powerful way to stop Satan's hold of you of shame, because you know what? There's nothing you can do that will stop you from God's grace. Like, he will forgive everything. That's so don't let Satan tell you that what you've done is too far or too much.
Exactly.
And someone needs to hear your story. And honestly, the very place that you want to hide and not tell is probably the very place God's asking you to talk to someone about it and boldly share.
You say that, well, one, you say forgiveness is not a one-time thing, which I so love. And I have read that somewhere else or something similar. And it's really true. Like, you can forgive, and in a certain moment you feel like, I've forgiven, and then like a month later you're like, I'm so freaking irritated.
You gotta forgive again.
And you're like, I thought I was over this. But I love the honesty there, that forgiveness can be on repeat, that you have to actually re-groove your brain to remember if that person's made in God's image too, whether you agree with what they've done or said or not. But forgiveness is for you to keep just letting there be freedom in that experience. And then you say, I thought this was really good. Yeah. So again, maybe this was from Sheila Walsh, but you bring it up, and it's from her book, The Storm Inside. Satan would love to keep each of us in a prison of unforgiveness, bound forever to the one who sinned against us. The enemy has many finely honed darts aimed at the hearts of all who love God. But hear this, he has nothing in his arsenal to combat forgiveness. And then you say, and this is you say, not only are we freeing ourselves from bitterness and resentment, but we are sucker punching Satan at the same time when we forgive. So powerful, because what can he do? There's nothing he can do when we say we've forgiven. There's freedom in that. I think
he wants us to stay stuck in the unforgiveness and the bitterness. He wants it to take over you, because bitterness is going to come in and poison you. It doesn't affect that person you haven't forgiven. They're long gone, but it just makes you bitter and angry. And so he wants that. He wants you to become a person that is resentful, and no one wants to hear from that person.
So it's just such a beautiful reminder. And that chapter is called Offering Forgiveness. And then there's another little section called Change Your Focus. And this I just thought was great, because I've walked closely with a couple friends who have lost a child at age 15. And I know the holidays can be such a hard time. And really, for like even for me when I lost my dad, like now you're going to go through Christmas,
Yes.
right? Coming up. And it's like,
It's going to be so hard.
right. And you're like, I don't want to go through these moments that your family has rituals and routines and everyone was together. But you have 10 steps to help you through the holidays. And then here is where you also remind people the names of God. El Roy, the God. Remind yourself who God is. The God who sees me, El Shaddai, the all-sufficient one. El Olam, everlasting God. Yahweh Shalom, the Lord is peace. Yahweh Yireh, the Lord will provide. And Yahweh Ra, the Lord my shepherd. Just all the different facets of who he can see us. He's sufficient. He's forever. He's peaceful. He'll provide. He's a shepherd and looks after us. While you're going through the holidays and suffering, and you have a good list of on page 141 on just being gentle with yourself, being honest, not looking at social media, don't rush your process. And I've witnessed that firsthand and just how crucial that is, because so many people in our society don't know how to help people who are grieving. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring it up. I don't want to upset you. And the people grieving, it's usually the opposite, where they're like, this is real for me. I wish somebody would enter into it with me rather than me having to bring it up or know when to bring it up. Not everybody has the same temperament, but I would say the majority of people feel lonely in their grief.
The holidays heighten the grief for sure.
Yeah.
And, the empty chair at the table, right? Where the person used to sit for the holiday, or, what the empty car seat, if there's just, it's very hard. And
whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I would say get off social media for sure. Like that's probably because everyone's posting pictures of family.
Yeah.
Everyone's posting, and you're just going to feel the loss deeper because you don't have that. It was my first Thanksgiving without my kids when I wrote that chat. That I didn't write it that time, but it's referring back to that first Thanksgiving without my kids. And I was heartbroken. It's a family day and I'm not with my family. And so it was really, I went with my sisters and stuff, but it's not the same as being with your kids. Right. And so,
of course.
But God gave me some beautiful wisdom about changing my focus and what do I still have in my life? Not what is lost, but what do I still have? But I think, again, that's something that maybe comes a little later. Like maybe that's not the first holiday.
I don't think you can do, depending on the loss, right? Depending on what it is. Because I know everyone's, like I said, their temperaments are different. Their situation is different. I think the loss of a child, probably at any age, whether they're, in your womb and you're thinking about the future with them, or they're young, or they're like Charlie Kirk. I was looking at his parents on the news yesterday thinking, they've got to be in their 70s and they just didn't think they would lose a child,
right.
And so it doesn't matter when it's your child, it's out of order. So I realize that different traumas can cause different lasting effects in your grief.
Correct.
But I feel like your book is just a beautiful catch-all for all the different components of grief. And I think anybody, whatever stage they're in of whatever loss or thing they're going through, there's so many good nuggets in it. Like, I'm really proud to know you. I'm proud of you. And then you said you have a little 26 chapter when does that come out?
So the chapter 26 is the last one in the book, but the epilogue is going to be coming out October 21st for the ebook and then November 4th for the print copy book. And what happened was I got married. So the Cliff Note version of why is I had to change the cover with my new name. The Jodi Rosser books that I had, my name before, I didn't have anymore. And I was like, okay, instead of ordering those, it's like, we need to change the cover. So then my publisher and I are talking and they're like, well, maybe people are going to want to know more about that story. Like, why is your name changed? And so she thought about me writing an epilogue to share about my meeting of my husband, who we met now in 2023. So like a year after the book published. And so we're coming on, just December will be 2 years and we'll be married. Okay. And so it was very quick. And anyways, so the beginning of the epilogue is that story of me meeting David, and it's beautiful. But what's crazy is she wanted me to write that in February, and I had too much going on with my son's final year of high school. I was like, I can't do this right now. I need to do it in the summer. I'm a teacher, I'm busy with school. I got a son who's a senior. Well, little did I know that before the summer hit, I'd lose my dad. Aww. And so I actually think it makes the epilogue more real, because you know what? I wish I could tell people, I had 3 great heartbreaks. Well, I did, but now I have another. It's not a one and done. It's not you go through one thing, or, once you've hit 3, you're done. Like, heartbreak just keeps happening in life.
That's life.
And And so it was a hard loss in May. And so I didn't write originally it was going to all be written and relaunched in August, which is when the birthday of the book was. And I was like, oh, I cannot do that right now. I can't. So in August is actually when I wrote the epilogue. It's beautiful. God brought it out of me, but I really find it, I honored my dad well in it, but I also honored the joy of meeting my husband in it. So it's the holding of the joy and the sorrow at the same time.
Yes,
and how do you do, and I don't really know how, but like as best I can, I say how I went through it. And then I've added more free resources in the back of the book, like those statements. You said the 10 things to help you through the holidays. And I added, 10 things to help if you're a friend of yours with cancer, how can you come alongside and help? And so things like that. I think those are real practical, helpful things. I wanted to put more of those in the book. And so that's what's changed in the book. The name on the cover, which is still me, but I just got married. And then this epilogue and these extra free resources in the back is what's been added to it.
Fantastic. And just before I ask some closing questions, how are you doing with your dad? Because I know that's really hard when your parents start to pass, and then you realize, okay, now I'm the next in line of the, if it all goes how you'd like it to go, if that you would be next. But how are you doing with that? Because I know that's a journey too.
Oh, it's still very challenging. I think my son heading off to college, like I already launched my oldest, and it's my baby that I took in September to SLO up in Cal Poly. And I think that is when the grief of my dad hit even harder, because it was like I already had a hole in my heart for my dad. And now I have a hole in my heart because my son is no longer in our house, which is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to launch. I'm so proud of him. It's what I wanted to have happen to him, but it's just like all at the same time. It was hard. Just wow. Like, God, could we have spaced these out a little bit? I think I could have handled them better. But you know what? It's okay. It's actually helped me re-enter into a lot of what I wrote the book for, right? Yes. So I've actually been going through my book and reading chapters to myself again and helping me go back to this message that I wrote for someone else who's hurting. And now I'm the one hurting to read it, So, I think the holidays is going to be really challenging. So I'm just, I think one of the things I say in the book is give yourself lots of grace. So I'm just reminding myself of that. Like, give yourself lots of grace.
You've become like a little Jedi Knight master with giving grace. I think that's what we have to do. We're hurting and things are wonky. It's like my favorite word. Like any transition where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Just have to let it be weird, let it be strange, and just know that God's right in there with you in the wonkiness of it all. And you've been through this before, so you're similar. It's not your father, and so there'll be different elements of that. But I love that you're reading.
I like to journal.
That's great.
Yeah. And I like to journal. So I've been journaling tons, and that's my way of getting it out. That's how I process it. So
what would you say your, knowing Christ has obviously been the foundation for you through all of these trials, but not everybody who watches this podcast knows him. They might know a little about him, or they maybe even were raised Christian or Catholic or something, but they don't really know him and they don't really practice, and they just maybe do church at Christmas or maybe not ever. But what would you say to somebody who's kind of reluctant to get to know Christ? Like, why should they come to meet him?
Well, I first would say, I don't know how I would get through my grief if I didn't have my faith. People have asked me that before, like, how'd you get through it? I'm like, my faith helped me so much. Like, I don't know who I'd be today if I didn't have that. Like, I'd probably be a very bitter, angry person, that why is this happening to me? And, instead of seeing God developing me and growing me, I would have had a different probably perspective. So I would say to someone, I would want you to know who he is before you walk through something hard, because he is going to be your anchor in the storm. And he's going to be your comfort when you just feel like everyone on the earth is gone, or just, when you feel alone. And loneliness is a huge part of grief, and we're not supposed to grieve alone. So I would say, join a support group, get a counselor, find ways to have others enter the pain with you. But my best growth time was my time with God. Like, I love my time with my counselor. She was so great. I even had her on my podcast, and she was a huge part of my healing. And I love her. And I think she's and I think counselors and Christian counselors, especially, that's what I would recommend. So huge. And my growth support groups were so great. But it was all of that led me back then to time with God. Like, that's where the actual healing happened. Yes. So I would say, you can try it without him, but I just think it's going to be so much harder.
I love that. I love that there is real healing. I had another guest on say that there really is healing. Like, you can really genuinely heal something with the love of Christ when you know him and you really understand and trust him, and you you spend time getting to know him. And that doesn't happen overnight. That is a journey and
Correct.
that is a process. So I love it, but it's worth it. So I love what you're
Worth
saying.
it.
Meet him, come to the table and get to know him. And that's why I named this podcast Room at the Table. Is doesn't matter what your doubt is. It doesn't matter your anger or your confusion or the Bible's too hard to understand or I've been hurt by the church or, I had this lifestyle and he won't accept me. So there is room at the table no matter who you are and where you've been. So what group of people or what people, children, adults, a friend, and you don't have to even name the person, but who would you like to know that there's room at the table of Christ even for them?
Well, I just think grief brings up a lot of questions, like you said, doubts. And I love this quote by John Ortberg. He says, if you ask someone when they walked away from their faith, the answer will be suffering. But if you ask someone when they grew the most in their faith, the answer will be suffering. So when you're grieving and when you're suffering, there is room at the table for you to come and bring those doubts to God and say, and wrestle. Like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, why? Like, why did you take my friend, God? Or why am I having to go through the divorce? Or why, did you take my dad? He was so healthy and what, all these things. But you know what? And it's okay to wrestle and have it. You just can't get stuck there to where you turn your back and walk away. You can have these times where you bring it to him and use that time to grow your roots deep versus walk away from your faith. But that is the catalyst. I think suffering and heartbreak, it is the time where you decide, is your faith really, am I going to stick with it or am I going to walk away from it? And so many people walk away. Like, he didn't do this for me. Or it's like, I know. But what if there's more he was doing in you than you could see? What if he was working in a way you couldn't see? Like, if you had told me, the grieving, hurting Jodi at 2014, that you would write a book and you would help people in your heartbreak from your divorce, I would have thought you were crazy. I could barely get out of bed. I had kids that were grieving. I just tried to survive. Yeah. But then God was my person that I turned to, and I didn't run away. I had doubts, I had questions, I had frustrations, but I went to him with them. Yeah. And I just sit there and I think I just want that person to hear it's lonely when you don't have him. And grief is lonely enough on itself. Don't turn your back on God and walk away. You just don't know what he's doing. He might be growing your roots deep. He might be wanting you to help someone that you wouldn't be able to help. Like, I remember when my friend in that chapter, the Hope Lifter chapter that you talked about, Kimberly, it's a friend that ended up going through a divorce also. And she texted me that she was going through this. And I sat there at one point and thought, this really sucks that I, have gone through a divorce too. But then I thought, no, this is who she needs to talk to. She needs to talk to someone who's been through a divorce, who didn't turn her back on God, who says, you're going to get through this. And so maybe you don't understand what God's doing, but he's going to use you in a way. But if you walk away, then he can't use you, you know?
So true. The holding on and not turning your back on God when you're suffering, in the middle of suffering. You can either do it alone or you can do it with him.
Yeah. And there's room at the table for you if your doubts. People say, well, I have doubts, I can't be at the table. No. God never said that. He's totally fine with the doubts. That's what Psalms is. Read Psalms. It's the lament. It's the time of David saying, this isn't what this is what I hope life would be. This is where life is. It's that complaining of how do I come to grips with it? And so there is totally fine. It's just turning your back. That's the thing that is not okay. Like, God can handle anything else. He can handle your anger. He can handle your questions and sadness, and just even being, like, I don't even want to be near you, but he just doesn't want you to walk away permanently.
Yeah. I love that, Jodi. It's so true that no matter your suffering, no matter your doubt, no matter maybe your rage or your confusion, like, he still invites you and wants you. None of that matters. You just can't give up. That's the only thing he asks, because then basically Satan wins. Like, if you turn your back, then Satan has told you a lie that you're not good enough and you're not going to understand him and he's not real. And that's kind of what his whole goal. But the Lord is real. The Lord is here. The Lord is present, and he wants you, regardless of your past or any of it. Past, present, so really, really beautiful answer there. Anybody that's suffering. Well, I'm just super impressed by you. You are so wise. You really are so wise. And you've really allowed the Lord to work on you and change you to be a blessing, from all of the the heartbreak. And I feel like the rest of us are just getting to benefit from it. So
Oh,
I think because I'll be referring your book out to people and looking back into it myself. And like I said, it's so digestible. It doesn't matter if you're a mature Christian or a new Christian or even a non-Christian, like this book has something for everyone in it. So just well done. And the Holy Spirit really moved you through it. So let me close in prayer over you.
Okay. Thank you.
Father God, thank you for this friendship with Jodi. Like what a gift it is to just hear her wisdom and to hear all of the discernment you've given her over her pain and her heartbreak, Lord. She has been willing to be used and nothing has been wasted, not for 1 second. And you've just done a beautiful work in her life. And I just ask for favor over her, God. I hope that this podcast can touch at least one person to where they realize there is room at the table for even them, that they're not alone in whatever they're dealing with, whether it's a deep, heavy grief or a more shallow grief. It doesn't matter, Lord. All of our suffering is seen by you. And you want us to come to you. And so thank you that Jodi is a beautiful example of using her pain to help heal others. And thank you for this precious time. It's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. It's been so good to hang out.
I've really enjoyed it. I'm so proud of you. You're doing a great job with your podcast.
Oh, thank you. I don't know, just like anybody else who's starting something, I still have moments where I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? But I'm doing it because he told me to do it. So even when I feel silly or stupid or not capable, I just say, it's none of my business. He told me to do it. I'm going to do it. So my girlfriend says what God endorses, he resources. And then another one of my friends says, wait, I have a note here. Another one of my friends just said, if he calls you to it, he atones it. And so I'm like, okay, Lord, like, let's go. So
yeah, that's good. I like those. I've heard if God calls you, he'll qualify you. I think that's the other one. He qualifies the called, not called. Yeah. Not calls the qualified.
Yeah. He doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. That's really good. Thanks for listening to Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo, friends. If you're enjoying the show, please like, follow, rate, star, and review it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. This all helps grow the show and helps listeners find us. And if you know of a Christian with an amazing testimony or ministry, feel free to direct message me on social media at Room at the Table with Kimberly Milo. Or you can email me at roomatthetableforyou@gmail.com. Thanks for your support. And remember, God loves you, and so do I.